Hello, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, and welcome to the very brand new episode of the TechOSpace podcast series. In this podcast episode, I'm super thrilled and honored to welcome one of the most prominent and eminent green software champion in the IT industry, Mr. Wilco Burggraaf, who happens to be the principal lead in the green software engineering and software engineering for the company, HighTech Innovators. So, Wilco, off to you. So, why don't you introduce about yourself to our listeners in depth and about your company, HighTech Innovators?
Thanks, Akil. Thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here. So yeah, HighTech Innovators. So I'm now working there since 2023. I'm a principal lead, like you mentioned, since 2025 this year. And it's really cool that what started in ID in January last year, eventually is now becoming a department. Hired my first employee in March, and the next one is starting in September, and more will follow. So that is kind of really cool. And also that I have a boss who really supports me with this whole idea, right? So when we started in January, so I saw seeing the website of the Green Software Foundation. My old boss pointed out like a customer of us, Canon, was busy with green software in their production lines. So I was like, okay, so this is something you really can apply. But then the whole journey of like just awareness, like, hey, IT, and we will talk probably later about this more, has an impact, indirect impact in multiple ways. But how do you do this actually in your operation? So how do you design certain architecture, use certain code lines in a sustainable way, and many other things. So yeah, that's been a real journey. And also I yeah, like with normally with journeys, you meet a lot of
Yeah,
people along the way. But yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. That's pretty interesting to know about Wilco, and that's a very interesting piece of news. So, without further ado, so let's kick off with the podcast session. So this
Mhm.
is 7:33 p.m. in Melbourne time. So let's kick off with the podcast session. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Wilco. So I'm pretty much keen to know about this. So Wilco, give me an overview of your tenure being the principal lead in terms of the green software engineering and software engineering for your company, High-Tech Innovators.
Yes. So, well, principal lead since 2025 this year, and really now building our department just on an ID that started like 1.5 year ago, a little bit longer than that. Hired our first employee in March. Second one is starting in September. We're gonna eventually grow further, and then this whole concept just started like last January or in 2024 January with just yeah, seeing the Green Software Foundation website for the very first time, pointed out by my old boss, and then yeah, just having an idea that IT has an impact indirectly, of course, on the world. And but then the question really quickly became if you want to eventually build a business or knowledge about how you actually do this in your operation, it's very hard to find quality information, right? So that's been really
Yep.
the journey in the last year. And yeah, now we having workshops. Already gave multiple to IT companies where we actually go into the practical details on how you can apply it in architecture, in coding, and then also in infrastructure as code, like for cloud native environments, that kind of stuff. And we also now really focusing on a service where we can help companies to really reduce their CO2 emissions. Also
All
with
right.
yeah, with a focus a little bit on cost. Yes.
That's a pretty interesting one. So, Wilco, I've just heard about this concept, the green software now. But Wilco, when you saw about, the green software, like what was your immediate reaction to that when you saw it on a website? Like as it was suggested by your boss.
So the first thing was like, hey, there are actually people now for multiple years busy on this topic, and written whole principles about it. And I was like, I didn't know anything about this, so this was somewhere going on in an ecosystem that I wasn't aware of. The other thing was, hey, but for the planet, I actually can do stuff with just doing my job, which is kind of pretty cool. And also at the same time, like getting this curiosity again. Also, that also helped that we joined the Carbon Hack 24 at the time and eventually won best contribution. But really, like getting that curiosity, not that I really lost it, but like everything that I learned in the last almost 25 years in my career. I'm only like, I would say I'm a bit old, 42. That's not that old probably, but everything that I knew, I kind of question now again from an energy consumption and a lifetime of device perspective. So yeah, it had a real impact, just that first look on that website.
That's amazing. As they say right in English, that one particular thing can actually change your life. One
Yes.
particular liner can actually give you a complete different direction. And I feel you just got the right call.
Yeah, that is exactly, and this is also this was really new. So I started to have like this feel this passion for this topic, and it hasn't stopped almost in a 1.5 year time. So every day I wake up and I'm like,
All
first
right.
I'm thinking, okay, what can I focus on today? What research can I do? What can I write? And yeah, that is just so cool.
That's brilliant to know. That's brilliant to know. Majorly, Wilco, the thing that I was very keen to ask you, like more than anything, was basically like I'm aware of the fact that you're a green software champion. So as a green software champion, like in depth, would you like to talk about your mission of bringing people together and building that tech that that works smarter, that performs better, and then along with that, it is driving the best, that climate change and the social change. Like what is with that?
So yeah, I mean it's very simple that if you so you have this whole operation, IT operation that you can greenify or make more sustainable. And the only thing what you actually need then is people who know how to do it. So and you see this also with other IT communities is like often the knowledge comes from these grassroots teams, groups, environments. This is also what I see at certain companies. So that
All
is
right.
one thing. The other thing that I really, and I think now one year later, it's even there's a big difference is that when I started, there were a lot of small groups everywhere. So 20
Hmm.
people here, 30 people there. And while I was like crawling LinkedIn and everything I could find on Google, I saw all
All
these
right.
groups and I thought, hey, but okay, so together with Pini, when we started the meetups and doing the meetups last year, was like, hey, how can we bring those people together at one
Right.
place so that they can talk to each other? What is now, I think, is a big difference now a year later, is that I think everyone is rallying around that we with IT can make a difference.
Hmm.
But it is also sustainability and green IT. It touches so much in the operation. There are so many roles involved. Also, a lot of different ideas that it's easy to get distracted. So, like everyone is talking about AI at this moment,
Hmm.
but as a community, I think as also as people active in the community, it's very important that we keep looking to what can we do as a community. We can really realize the how, and that is what I keep how do you say putting effort in every day to make that try to make that happen because you cannot do it alone. You have to do it together. Uh, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it always requires a team's effort to get the best result.
Yes, that is true.
Absolutely. That's wonderful, Wilco. Now, Wilco, I mean, suppose if if anyone comes to you for the first time and they get to know that you're a green software champion, and to explain about your designation, I mean, as a green software champion, how would you explain them? Like, what are the things you would give them a walkthrough about?
So the three pillars that I often and I hope that I remember them while telling them. So
Right.
the first thing is everything about energy. So everything, although we use software, it runs somewhere and it uses oftentimes electricity. So in electricity, depending especially where in the world on the grid you are, indirectly emits CO2 emissions. In the Netherlands, for example, the main core thing that we emit is because they try to stabilize the grid with gas turbines. We have a lot of renewables, but still.
Right.
That is one thing. The other thing is the pillar is like how we use and write software has an impact on our devices, especially with heat. It
Yep.
gets cooled, but let's take your mobile phone. If it's over, this happened to me a week ago. That was overheating because of I expect. I'm not gonna call names, but it was a navigation system that is used with my Android phone,
All right.
um, and it was really overheating the system. So that has impact on the hardware. So
Right.
we have with our software impact on that. And then the third one is the unwritten rule, as I call it often. It is something that I encountered while doing research and talking about it a lot, is that once the resources are available to us, so things that already are built and exist, try to use that in the most efficient way possible, but with the least amount of negative impact.
Right.
And that is I think a very important thing. So before you buy something new or build something new, how can you use what you already have better? And those three pillars are I think the core where all my research that I done myself and the talks that I give are built upon. But yeah.
That's amazing. I think now our listeners can get an understanding about, what green software is. And, now they'll
Yeah.
definitely, now I'm pretty sure that, they'll definitely have a complete walkthrough, or let's say, have a research about that on Google. Okay, this is what it is. And they'll try to, let's say link it to the different technologies that they are aware of, if I'm not
Yes.
wrong.
Yes. And where there's also the challenge that sometimes you make something more energy efficient, but does it
Yep.
then also last for a longer period of time? It's not always playing nicely with each other. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. That completely serves the point. Now, Wilco, I just wanted to understand, like, what has your take been on, the community, at the core, with respect to the sustainability? Like, how are you able to link these two things together?
Um, well, the first thing is, so you're bringing people together. Not everyone wants to organize, but like I said, you want eventually to listen to people and then eventually make the conversation happen. And like I said, in how can we actually do this? And that having that conversation, I think I really go back. I also did this in a talk earlier this year when it comes just to human conversation, human interactions. How can we better work together as a community? Because this whole movement is something from the long run. There is no quick fix. And if we really want to make eventually a change together to have a positive impact, yeah, that is kind of the starting point from my perspective. And the other thing
All
is
right.
to keep the how do you say the momentum going. I always refer to the place that is kind of already there for a while, and that is the
Okay.
climateaction.tech. That is a how do you say it?
Hmm.
An organization that's out there for many years. All the originals or the OGs, how I call them, like Chris Adams, Wasim Hussein, Anne Curry, like all the people that have been active in this field, they are kind of all they have an account there. I don't know how often they log in, but I think, but it's a place where people come together. I believe on the website it was more than 10,000 people have signed up at some point.
Hmm.
So if you have a question or you want to be more involved, it's a great place to be because what I've seen also in the Netherlands, people in the beginning are very enthusiastic. We should have a Discord and a YouTube and all this stuff and create a lot of resources. The question is that it's sustainable, but and then it's very hard to maintain it for a longer
Yeah.
period of time. And you're not always sure when someone feels the need to have to want to some certain information or to know something or to need help. So being there for each other and helping each other out and volunteering. I always keep saying we need more volunteers. And I know that not everyone has time, and it can also sometimes be in a small way. Even like just liking a post of someone active in the field that he knows or she knows. Okay, someone is like reading this content. That helps really out. Yeah.
You just gave me a very interesting point now, about volunteering. Now, when it comes to volunteering, if suppose, let's say, Wilco, someone is approaching you and he says that, Wilco, I want to do volunteering for this particular, let's say, community. Will you see that, that person has the expertise on the lines of green software? Or do you think, anyone who's new to the IT department, do you, encourage such people also, into this community?
I think everyone can help. Especially so even like the climate action tag that I just mentioned, they have a beautiful workflow for this. But most of the time, everyone starts their journey in the same way. You're looking for
Yeah.
resources. So from the
Yeah.
moment you know those resources, you can tell about those resources to others. Then you get to the point, okay, this is like something in my field or my interest, and this can be professional, this can also be personal. If you're like, hey, I can share something about this, even maybe the content is already known, just sharing it, it is already important for others to know, oh, wait a minute, there are also other people who are active with this topic, so you can have a normal human conversation about this and that kind of stuff. So
Exactly.
and you can completely go to the nitty and gritty and to all the best the newest information. And this is also sometimes I feel like a challenge that people who already are longer in the field, it is sometimes easy to forget where you came from. So where did your journey start, and how
Exactly.
eventually are you ending up at the point where you are now? So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
why from just in depth from knowledge to helping people out with their journey, I think everyone can help out. Yeah, and if you want to know more details, I can share some links so it can be added to the podcast. But yeah.
100%. 100%. 100%. I mean, the first question that my listeners would ask is like, we want to have a link. We want to just, understand, like, okay, what is this about? Something it's interesting. So we need to, just venture ourselves into that particular thing.
Yeah, I always start with questions because on LinkedIn I get a lot of these questions like, "Hey, I want to help
Right.
out. Where do I start?" And then my first questions are often like, "Hey, are you interested in this from a personal perspective, or are you eventually now studying something with sustainability, or are you professionally focusing on what are so eventually to exactly what I said, pointing now to the right direction because that is, I think, the most challenging in our field is there is so much, and it can be daunting at some points. So keeping it
It
simple
is. It is.
and guide, I think, is an important part.
Starting with a complex thing is always daunting. You need to just start in a step-by-step manner. If you follow that step-by-step manner, probably things become much more easier.
Yeah.
That's pretty good to know. Wilco, no, Wilco, I'm pretty much keen to understand this. Like, Wilco, like, what is your emphasis, on designing with impact, like designing with impact in the IT industry? Like, why do you say that designing with impact is required?
Well, so first of all, maybe, and this just comes on top of my head, is what I often say is whatever you do, you always have negative impact. The question is it worth it to you or to the organization? So, and not that we should have more and more negative impact, but it's more showing already that impact is always going on. You can ignore it, but being aware of it, I think, is a better approach. So that is I think one thing, and then the other things is there are there are real impacts going on from IT perspective. Like I said, with the pillars before, with the electricity and the lifetime of devices and the resource use. So those are in some way just design requirements, and I believe from the health of your IT organization, architecture, everything, being more aware how you use resources. So what we now often have is you have a project and a project needs to finish in a certain amount of time. And the main focus is the how do you say this? The time to market. So how quickly can you push it out there? And we do that often in a way where we're not like fine tuning the resources as best as we could. And then we have sometimes maintenance teams, but the maintenance teams are not always very comfortable in adjusting certain things because if a system starts failing because of their adjustments and they don't know exactly how the software internally works, that can have a certain impact. So I really believe that even with the whole concept in from another perspective from shift left. So more in the beginning with security, you see this as well. More in the beginning, be really aware on how you use resources. So I'm not even talking about sustainability or green. But the funny thing is, so if you already start by, do we actually need this resource? Or can we eventually run on less Docker or virtual machines? It will have a positive impact on your cost. It will have a positive impact on your emissions, and will also have
Oh,
a positive impact on eventually. If you have a clear idea on how you design it, you probably, this is oversimplified, but you're probably also gonna run it longer. It's just that's all I say. Green is more about the renewables and more short term. Sustainability is how can you support it on a long period of time. Also, if you
yep.
more focused on your architecture from, how do you say it, more focusing on it, you're probably also kind of think more about concept like clean architecture, hexagonal architecture, that kind of stuff. But it also has to do with how do I treat the applications and the things going on there more with more responsibility.
All right. Now, I mean, you just brought up a point called Docker. Like, how are you able to link Docker and, the, how do I say, the sustainability point of view? I mean, that is a different kind of a crossover. Trust me.
So okay, I'm gonna try to keep it simple because I can go fully geek out on this topic already. So let's just say that often, although it's virtually, but if I've seen this with, I've done a lot of measurements in the last year. If you run an application and you do some programming that really utilizes CPU good in a good way, you will
Yep.
almost claim one core of a CPU. So that means one core of a CPU relates to actually energy use of that core, and it makes it
Hmm.
instant physical. So although it was virtual at the beginning, it converts instantly almost to the hardware that you're not seeing. It's maybe running somewhere in the cloud, whatever. But although you're renting the cloud space, you're still responsible for its scope 3 and scope 2 and scope 3 indirectly. Um, in this case, so you could debate that a lot of this is scope 3 or because you hire it, or it should be scope 2. That is more like probably now, how do you say, how do you how do you look at the governance and the laws and that kind of stuff right now. But
All right.
yeah, so so you have something that runs software, a container is nothing else than a shell around it, and it has immediate impact. And we have the formula since a year now also how to calculate it. So this, the Green Software Foundation, they created with with all the members, they created an ISO model that is a software carbon intensity, but we know actually how to calculate this. So it is not abstract or vague. And then the only question becomes, and now I'm going really into depth, but I really would like to touch on this as well, is that often the reporting part in a company would say, yeah, but it doesn't materialize because that software you run, we don't see it in the books how it makes us money, or what the risks are or how it's an asset. And the funny thing is, from the moment you run AI in that Docker container, they are
Yep.
like, yeah, we cannot run with this Docker container with AI because else we cannot compete with our competitors, and this is the most important thing for our revenue. So software does actually materialize. It is still something conceptually that we have to, yeah, talk more about and explain more.
Exactly. So what I was trying to say is like you just were trying to talk about the crossover between the Docker and the
Yes.
sustainability. Sometimes to cross over such things, do you feel that, there is some kind of a compliance that comes into picture, like, some kind of restrictions?
Well, in the especially with Omnibus, so this has happened early this year. What Omnibus is was an event where the original CSRD. So this is like the law in the European Union about how to report about your emissions and other, not only emissions, all kind of a negative impact that you do as a company and positive impact. They
Yep.
they oversimplified it and made it easier. So what you see is that there are not clear. So for AI there are, but in this case for IT and software there are not clear rules and laws how to implement these things to. So let's just say you have 10 virtual machines. how are you going to report their emissions? The only thing that is kind of asked of you as a company, like just report about them and explain how you did it. So it's very kind of open and also open for interpretation. And this is also kind of what is happening because this is also another bridge. So you have greenhouse gas accounting because reporting about emissions come from the accountancy world, the GRI organization, if I said it correctly.
Yep.
And they look everything from out of financial perspective. And from now that perspective, they also have kind of, how they say it, certain rules, how you can lower amount because there is a certain law or a certain rule set that allows you to lower the amount. This is also happening with CO2 emissions. So if you have a green contract or a certain offset where you say, I buy something to lower this amount of emissions so we can report it lower, this is actually happening and making this all very complex. So yeah, there's still, I mean, I have good faith that a lot of companies want to do it well. Also,
Yep.
the people in the companies that I talk to, they really want to find quality information on how to best report on IT. But yeah, we're far away from what we actually maybe need on certain rules, laws, ISO models, that kind of stuff.
That completely explains the point, Wilco. Now let's get to a backstory. Every particular person has a backstory in his life. So the backstory starts like this. Like, Wilco, I'm pretty keen to understand this. Like, what was your inspiration and drive to pursue into the domain of the green software?
So when I first heard about climate change and everything around this, it was from two perspectives not weird for me. So one of the
Okay.
things is that I literally grew up on a factory. So my dad was a night
Hmm.
guard. It was a coal factory, and if my mom hang the wash out to dry, it was dirty within 30 minutes because of the dust, the coal dust of the very small particles. So that was one thing, and also it had impact on the health of our family. I
Okay.
moved away there since I was, I think, 7. So I mean, often I was there when my dad was doing stuff at I'd say at the factory.
All right.
But for me, it had not the same negative impact on the health as well, like with my parents and other my family members. And the other thing is we also always went to on holidays for like 5 weeks. My dad, he kind of saved up all his, and we have in the Netherlands a lot of holidays that you
Oh,
can
okay.
save up. So we went for 5 weeks to Norway, and there were like a lot of glaciers. Or how do you say this? Glaciers, do you say correctly? That were so that is very old, of course, ice that was just melting every year further away, that you literally visually saw like, hey, there is something weird happening here. And my parents went there since I believe the beginning of the 90s, and they're in their 70s, and this year they still went to Norway, and where first there were meters of snow, there's now nothing anymore. So it is
Oh my
very,
God.
very visible on the change in the same time. So around that May, where there's a lot of so for me it was not very so. And then the idea like, hey, wait a minute, so companies start more caring about this, especially with our previous company that where I was CTO at, where we had portfolio management system where ESG became part of. If there was a research project going on in the portfolio of a certain company, did it hit a certain ESG profile? I was like, yeah, this is kind of cool and important, and I really like that companies, although often from a financial perspective, but they paid more attention to it. So this kind of when I was eventually reading for the first time then on the Green Source Foundation, that was already kind of some big things building up towards that moment that I was like, yeah, okay, this now starting to make sense and I can actually do stuff.
All right. So that's a pretty good one. I mean, I'm totally like inspired by that. And yeah, I mean, you just gave me a very good backstory about, about the glaciers and all of that. Now, you know, like, I mean, as a green software person, like, I mean, what are the things that you see to, just get the things better out of the environment? Like, what are the, key strategies that you have taken, to ensure that things don't go out of hand?
So as a practical question, The core thing that I really try to do is and I also work for a nature data bank. That's also what I do beside everything else that I do. So that's one of my customer where I'm a solution architect, and with two teams we working there on bringing biodiversity data in the Netherlands publicly available, and we released the first version in February this year. So that was the first time that everyone could see literally in their backyard, like what kind of insect, plants, fish, birds, anything is
Oh,
there kind of, yeah. And then there were more than 230 million observations in the whole Netherlands. So for a small country, that is
oh
a lot
my
of lot
God.
of data.
That's
So
a staggering amount.
and the challenge there was, okay, how can we reduce the amount of compute and the things that we actually need? So if you look at, we offered that to whole Netherlands, and if you look at the architecture, it is so simple. It's brought so back to its core. So that is one of the things that you actually can do. And now what we also are looking into. So this is something that we did a few months ago, because first we had a lot of people in our team that were new to the cloud. So then building up with sustainability on top of it, you also have to look from a social perspective, was too much at that moment. Now we're also
Exactly.
looking to the perspective of, okay, do we need development environment at night and in the weekends? No, okay, we're gonna shut it off. Or do we always need like the best server? Can we sometimes really also scale back, and only if we do that very complex batch, because we do a lot of also with Apache Spark and Databricks. So
All
how
right.
can we handle those batches in a better way? So it's really cool that in my daily, well, customer job, I can also practice what I preach.
Yep.
But yeah.
Absolutely. Both of them are balancing out really well. And Wilco, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm really, really happy with the fact that, whatever your company is doing and what you're doing, way to go for that. And really,
Mhm.
really, it's pretty much inspiring for me. The moment I'm just hearing more about it, I'm like, wow, superb efforts on on those lines. Seriously.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I'm not joking at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, Wilco, now talking about your expertise, like how would you like to, explain that on the lines of, the architectural design? How are you able to align the architectural design and the green technologies with that of the, the regular SDLC, agile methodologies? Like how are you able to link the three together?
Yeah, I have a very love-hate relationship. Well, it's a strong word, but I love agile, by the way. So that's putting that first out there. And there are a lot
All
of
right.
people like the Agilists for Planet and greenpo.org. I also added I will send also the links for that for the podcast episode. But let's go to the beginning. So I really strong believe at some point in time with Agile that a lot of companies, because a lot of people do it in their own way, we were focused on vertical teams. So you were offering, so first we had, of course, front office, mid office, back office, and then we switched to vertical teams where you build it, you run it, and you maintain it. And that's really cool. To some degree, because if you have such a team, and of course some teams do multiple things, but if you're such a team, you're kind of incentivized to make sure that your product or your feature stays alive. And the core thing that I already said earlier, you should kind of question yourself, do we still need that feature or application? And some people would say,
Exactly.
of course, a team will say that they
Yeah.
will like, how to say it, dissolve the team and do something else. Well, often that not always happens. So you already see that where agile is more focused on how can we more predictable have an output of work, and it's less about resources. The funny thing is that ETIL, when everyone says, hey, this is like old fashioned, you should not do that anymore, unless you're a company with a lot of laptops, a lot of devices, a lot of things going on. If you would put all the cloud resources in that system as a software asset, which is part of the ETIL system, they already have a kind of a resource lifecycle management framework. But it is a very specific one, and we kind of, so this is also something that I said to the academia and the university, we kind of need a new resource lifecycle management system or framework, I have to say, where all the resources, all your laptops, mobile phones, cloud resources, applications are in a big list, and they all have
Mhm.
like the amount of kilowatt hours, CO2. So if you have applications, you have multiple of them, you can just add them up. Same for like the S3 buckets or other cloud resources, and just say so much kilowatt hours, so much CO2. You can also combine it with security, like who needs access to this? Can we maybe reduce that? Although security, we are kind of in the same boat, but security want things redundant. That's not always the most green thing, but
Yeah.
okay. And also then from a financial. So I always use this example from Schneider Electric, where from time to time have a conversation with the vice president technical debt.
Hmm.
Um, and they have literally done this. So they created this list, and they almost not on, but just below board, they make decisions on, okay, if we reinvest in this, how does this impact the resources, and how does this also impact on our footprint as a big company? And I really
Exactly.
like that concept. So so back to agile. So I think that there are certain ways you could be if so let's say that you use prioritizing to bring sustainability and green in, so that you prioritize certain PBIs and user stories, and do it from that perspective. I think that's really cool. There's also another agile movement going on, and I like the concept from a personal standpoint, where I think that movement more says, hey, we should more focus on degrowth, so do less, and that kind of stuff. The only thing what I find challenging is, because I really, like I said at the beginning, we're really focusing on how in the operation. So if you want to bring along more the B Corps and the companies who do it from my own perspective, and you want to bring more than 50% of the whole business along, yeah, it doesn't always work that way, that companies want to do less. They often want to do more. And I always say, well, if that's the case, then try to do it in a sustainable way and in a green way, at least. Um,
Exactly.
but yeah. So I mean, in Agile, like I said, I will also send the links. It will there's a lot of happening, but it is not that simple.
It is not simple at all.
Yeah.
Now, in agile thing, like, when we are combining, the green technologies with respect to agile, like in every agile, let's say, in every sprint, is there the discussion that, we need to reduce the carbon emissions, or we need to reduce, like, when we are talking about the reduction of carbon emissions, is it more than the carbon emissions that we are concentrating on, or are we, trying to go more,
Yeah.
away from that?
Well, I'm going to quote, well, not the exact quote from another podcast, Green IO,
Okay.
and Anne Freeman, if I say her name correctly. She's from New Zealand, and she did this
Okay.
with her team. And what they did was, and I kind of, now not stole it the right word, I copied it, where she said, like,
All
every
right.
time she just showed the dashboard, in this case of the hyperscalers. And I know the
Amazing.
hyperscalers data is not correct, but for the low-hanging fruit, you will see in the beginning, you will see the changes. And what she did, she showed like the dashboard every end of the sprint, just on the screen, just leaving it there. And eventually
Okay.
people, of course, start asking questions, and eventually motivation came to do more with it. I kind of, like I said, copy that idea, and that I think works pretty well as a starting point. Of course, you need to have more debates on how you can do more as a team. And at certain organizations in the Netherlands, multiple banks do this, where the teams really debate on, okay, we have from FinOps, we have a set of rules that we should lower our cost. We also want to do it in a sustainable way. So how can we lower as a team, lower our footprint and our the use of the resources, and that way lower the cost of the resources. It's not always said, by the way. This is kind of, I like the idea that in some cases, like say 50% of the cases, you can lower the emissions at the same
Mhm.
as lowering the cost. And that is also, I think, in ESG and sustainability reporting, cloud of a cost spent as a factor comes in, but it's only situational. It's very contextual. So if you really want to holistic as a team want to improve, you sometimes need to invest in your architecture or invest in your software to lower the amount of footprint. I have an example of this where in my
All right.
presentation
Okay.
I show a use case like, hey, you have 1,000 virtual machines. They are running average on 30% the whole year. Now
Mhm.
we're reducing the amount of virtual machines from 1,000 to 400 virtual machines, and that number was with a reason, because I calculated on the background. So now we utilize it on 75% over the whole year. but the amount of CO2 emissions is exactly the same. So it is not
Oh,
always that if you utilize, so if you want to do, it was possible, but then you need to do more. So it's not always like, oh, we're doing less resources and then now we're using less resources and now we need to utilize more, that you instantly will lower emissions. And that's why using tools. So I love Kubernetes, and the Kubernetes you have the most products to measure. So if you use Kubernetes in your company, you can use Kepler, for instance, but also Kite, which is an open source project on top of Kepler, where you can see literally in production the amount of emissions real time over a longer period on how much is emitted, and you can see really if your decisions really made any difference. So it's on cluster level. So if you then lower the amount of instances, you will see what actually not only in cost but actually also happens in emissions. So there are ways.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very good way of, doing the troubleshooting here. That's amazing, Wilco. Now, Wilco, now, I mean, we were just talking entirely about, your, tenure and all of that. Now, Wilco, heading on to this one, like as a strategic advisor for the company Green PT, like what were the key strategies that were taken by you?
So first of all, I'm under an NDA and I'm currently working on a new metric. So soon a new metric will
Okay.
come out.
All right.
But one of the core things that what I can talk about is the following. So what a lot of people also with AI don't maybe instantly see is that there's a difference between operational and reporting emissions. So I kind of
All right.
explained it already before. So if you run AI at Microsoft, or even if you do it self-hosted somewhere and you get the reports from your supplier, there will be greenhouse gas accountant um, going on. So the numbers probably are lower than what they in operational are. So, and then then the following that I want to, how to say it, move to next then is reporting is often top-down, aggregated information and shown in graphs, while yourself as a user using a chat prompt or a Gen AI prompt, ChatGPT or whatever, that is bottom up. So if you look at from a bottom up perspective, you often get one GPU, potentially an 800 NVIDIA with 300 watts. So we
All
know
right.
we know kind of the cards that are used, and from operational perspective, we have also the following, and this is from own tests and things that I also validated, is that Gen AI, and I don't want to sound in the wrong way, it's kind of boring. The reason why is the reason why is with CPUs you have to do all these tricks to kind of calculate what the energy use is, because there's a lot of different cores that go up and down and all these kind of things. With Gen AI, especially, it's such a how do you say it, an optimized algorithm that will use very stable, somewhere between 70 or 80% of your GPU card. If you have multiple users on the same CPU card, it will be so async parallelized that will be very stable. So because it's stable, where with CPUs you cannot really work as time as a proxy to calculate energy or emissions. With Gen AI, you very well can, because we know that the first prompt it will run so you type your prompt, you get the output things back, and the first time it will run a little bit longer to optimize stuff in depending on the model. But then the next
Right.
time, it's almost from the moment it starts spewing out or reasoning or output tokens till the end, it has a very stable utilization of the hardware, which means you can very stable, how do you say, calculate the energy and the emissions. So this is something that I brought in at GreenPT. This is kind of also the core things that we are working on. I really like that the CEO he wants to be very transparent. So we will bring out a new metric. We also will bring out what we can be transparent out and what we want to be transparent in the future, not because we don't want to, but because we lack the data, like everybody's always talking about. And we will be very clear about that. And then the other thing that I really talked also with them about, that I think I can say, is the difference between you as a user, probably at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, wants to know how much energy and emissions did I produced by using this GreenPT service. That is one thing, but that is a reporting perspective. Then the other thing is, we eventually want you to have a clear ID, and this is the metric what I cannot talk about. Kind of in
All right.
overall, from the first moment you prompt to the value you have, you want to as be as short as possible. Because, like I said, like time, so you can vary almost so every time it's producing output. That time in a time span, the shorter it is, you get to your end result, the less energy and the less emissions. So yeah, it's really fun. I have also videos of this where I show this in action with just everything running on my machine. The only big difference between if you have a gaming NVIDIA and like an 800 or 800 is that a gaming NVIDIA can really go back if it's idling to 3-4 watts or sometimes 10
Wow.
watts, really back, but on purpose. The NVIDIA cards, sadly, or the AI cards in the beautiful rack setup, they only scale back to 100 watts. So that means
Okay.
that if you have a lot of GPUs ready to do something for AI and they're doing nothing, they're consuming a lot of energy. And we know
Right.
from theory that you could bring it back to 25 watts, but then you have to, as a hyperscaler or a data center, update the firmware. And
Mhm.
I don't believe a lot of data centers want to do that. So sadly.
I know. I know. All right then. Now, I mean, this is pretty much interesting. When I'm asking this question to you, I'm finding a lot of curiosity in this particular thing. So,
Mhm.
Wilco, tell me about your inclination on applied science. On the perspective of these two tech things, which is like the software and the servers.
Yeah.
Like what kind of a combination is that?
So applied science. So how can I can bring this the best way is that there is more than 10 years of research, and the research has often been done on efficiency and on from the software engineering perspective.
All right.
But the thing that so the first conversation I had with a professor last year, Bernd van Gastel, he explained very clearly that there's not always a correlation between the energy consumption and the compute efficiency from a CPU, for instance. So it's not always that
Okay.
if you make your algorithm more efficient, that will consume less energy. It is the other way around. It is the case that if you go from an x86 or x64, sorry for all the technical specifications, but you go to an ARM processor. So those are kind of the types of processors in the last, what is it, 40 years of or a CPU architecture. So if you go to ARM, like Apple, of course, with their MacBooks and kind of use them, you're gonna see that you're gonna use, of course, like with a mobile phone, you're gonna use less energy.
Exactly.
So those are also, of course, then interesting choices to make. But what I find, so where I like head-ons last year start diving in is okay, but if you look at how a CPU work, we just discussed GPUs. And GPUs, by the way, the other reason they're boring, a little back reference, is because you actually can just ask how much watts they're running on, because it's in the NVIDIA SDK. You can just say, give me the watts every millisecond. But but the CPUs, it is a little bit more complex. So the first thing that I really focused on was, okay, what are the patterns? So are there energy consumption patterns going on the CPU? And there are. So they're kind of obvious. So the most thing always everyone is talking about hotspots, but you should more talk about underutilization. So where do we not use the cores well enough? The other thing is bottlenecks. So are there things because of network or disk or other things that are kind of preventing it to have the resource work well? The other one is waiting patterns. So we do a lot of connection to a database, connection to another server, and I even seen like in code, seen someone programming a waiting loop where it's utilizing the CPU fully, while there's also a waiting pattern possible where you almost use the core to very low amount of resource. So like I so underutilization, bottlenecks, waiting patterns. So, and then the last thing is kind of how you queue up code that needs to be computed. So, and this was kind of apparently new for the field. So that was kind of cool. And then I'm going to the following. So we need more research on this. And a lot of research now is often very focused on how it can maybe help big companies. But I think push this field, we need more on that. And what I think can help. So and Gen AI can, and I have a playbook for this, can detect these patterns if you have a combination of static code, so just programming language, and runtime information, so things you log while running the system, and bring it together. So you can with Gen AI. The only problem with Gen AI is, and this is also something, if it would be an AI talk right now instead of sustainability, Gen AI is sadly too slow. And then the question is, how is it too slow? Well, if you take the source code of Kubernetes, which is like 20,000 files, and I expect it to be around 50 million tokens. If you want to analyze those 50 million tokens with 115 tokens per second, you're busy with hundreds of hours just doing analysis, and you can scale up, but then it will consume a lot. Well, it will burn your wallet and it will use a lot of energy.
A lot of energy,
So
exactly.
so we need more research on this. So that's why I also like in the Netherlands, I'm talking with multiple technical universities. Well, it was for a while this year bi-weekly. The last months, of course, it's now holiday, summer holiday. And also I've been, that was really cool. I've been also invited to do, how do you say it? A keynote for the National Science Organization in the Netherlands. So that's the how to say it, the organization where all the technical universities, all the universities are kind of part of. So
All right.
and then the fun fact is that, well, like you said, you have a backstory. I have no how to say it, university degree and college degree. I don't say you shouldn't study, but but you can get there someday. You can get there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. That's a very good piece of advice. So Wilco, like earlier, you just were giving me an example that about tokenizations. Let's say 500 tokens. Like on a rough estimate, Wilco, I'm pretty much keen to understand this. Like how much energy is being, let's say consumed for that. Like on a, on a rough basis.
If you talk about so if you talk about inference and reasoning and other things, and you have also, so of course, a small model. But like I said, utilization is very stable. So yeah, like I said, 300 watts. And then maybe if you're running in the data center, you have also something called like a PoE. I forgot what the complete explaining was of PoE, but it's like the
Right.
overhead. So like for every kilowatt hour in the data center, you need cooling and other stuff. And if it's let's take the most bad factor that would be out there, 2.0. It's all below like a factor of 2. Most of them are, I believe, like 1.3, 1.4. So let's say that make the 300 watts like 600 watts.
Oh my God.
That then a lot of people would say, oh my God, indeed, that kind of how do you say it? But the funny thing is, a lot of people who are parents have kids who are gaming like 20 hours a week on a device with 1,000 watts. No, I'm serious. So I don't say AI is
Yeah,
not bad, but I always say like it's very important to put things in perspective. So yes, AI consumes energy. Yes, we're building now these huge amount of new data centers, although in Europe we're kind of limited. So there were all these articles about that there were like how do you say it, nuclear power plants were revived and that kind of stuff. But that is at some point you can do that a few times and then it's kind of done. And
right.
another thing, what a lot of people forget is that a lot of those data centers are not even used by us or by the companies. So there's a lot of investors that invest in a potential new thing that can happen in the future. If I would just do a rough out of my head prediction that it's like 80% for potentially that's something and that we now use a lot of energy for, and maybe 20% that is us. Doesn't mean that it's not a bad thing, but it's very easy to, in the AI discussion and sustainability, to get polarized, and we should not fight over this. We should work together on this.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, if you work towards it, you'll find a right solution for that.
Yes.
All right. So now, Wilco, like, I just want to understand, like, what is your take with respect to the analytics on the lines of sustainability? How do you, compare these two?
Yeah, if I'm allowed, can I intertwine, or how do you say exchange how do you say analytics for observability?
Yeah, you can.
Because observability makes it easier. Because
Yeah.
observability is kind of the thing that you need in green IT and sustainable IT. where you probably want to monitor a system. To do so, you need logging from that system. You eventually need certain metrics on how a system performs. And then the question becomes mainly, and this is always if I do like a new awareness training, the first question is, yeah, but if we measure our system that has a footprint on its own, it's often like 1 or 2% compared to the actually workload. So yes, it has an impact, but it's often not as big
Yep.
as people expect. And then I have a personal preference to do with benchmarks. So to do a prediction, like this is also where we focus in our service on, like we do a benchmark in the test phase where we do integration tests and we expose a certain application to certain, like how does it work in full load, in idle time, in normal usage, and then see what's kind of going on there. So yeah, but it's also possible with real time. And then there is this difference that I already explained kind of a bit and multiple times, is what we do here is operational raw insight. So
Exactly.
everything you can, and we often do this with estimations, if everything you can kind of calculate is also very good so if your supplier tells you like this is the amount of kilowatt hour, this is the amount of CO2, if you have like an own estimation in house, you can kind of debate it like, hey, and we've seen this in the Netherlands, literally, where the numbers were like, so someone had observability set up from on-premise, went to a hyperscaler, and then the hyperscaler told that they used 1/3 of the energy they used before. And then they came back, yeah, but we're using renewables. But yeah, we're using renewables. It makes sense for CO2, but not energy-wise. And they had kind of pretty good hardware before that. So having this setup, that observability, that insight, it also gives you, I think, the right leverage that you should have to have an honest conversation with a supplier. So
Yeah.
I think it from that perspective that it's really really important.
That completely explains. Now, what do you exactly mean by, the tests? Like what you were just saying, tests.
Oh,
Is it like, anything with respect to, the QA activity that is, coming into the picture, or is it something else related to that?
you mean the tests to see how a system performs? So what we,
Yep.
and this is also where we maybe sometimes think differently than other people right now in the field, is that we want to validate it with information. So we want to validate eventually if we made a change, if the CO2 and energy changed. But in our test, we mainly focus on, hey, where do we see the bottlenecks and the waiting patterns, where I talked earlier over, and underutilization. And we know, because our experience, that we know that if we tweak that it will have a positive effect, or that it will be in line of maybe some sustainable, so long-term architecture goals that we have.
Yep.
And this is the whole concept of our service, that we're literally building now this, and next month we're building this framework up. And then we're gonna hopefully talk about it more. So that the core idea is, from my perspective, is a lot of companies have a lot of developers. In the Netherlands, we sometimes have companies who have 10,000 developers. Then 400
All right.
people are very enthusiastic to do more sustainable stuff. But how do you scale it up to the whole 10,000? And what you've seen with security as well is, if you start mandatory automate certain tooling into the CI/CD pipelines, that it works very well over the whole chain. So this is
All
exactly the
right.
route we take. And also we're working with a lot of different tool makers. So we have a lot of people who build measurement tools in the sustainability space, and kind of
Okay.
use from our perspective, the right tool at the right place. So from some tools we use for the benchmarking, and some tools we use for the validation and production to see if the change actually happened.
Wow. That's interesting. Now, I just want to understand, like, how do you feel? Like, how are you able to link the CI/CD with that of the sustainability thing? It's again, it's going to different realms of technology and, to different realms of the software industry. But
Yeah.
how are you able to link the DevOps CI/CD pipeline with sustainability? Like, how is the crossover on that?
Well, yeah, like I said, the two things. So how can we predict? It's like with the car with the wind tunnel. So how can you predict eventually how much energy it produces? I mean, the automotive industry with some lawsuits had to do this in Europe.
All
So
right.
we know for sure. So of course, it's not complete real life scenarios, but it's a good benchmark to compare different cars and that kind of stuff. And the other thing
Right.
is, So what I always say is the following. So if we do a benchmark with the Java application, and the Java application shows that it kind of uses just too much memory to put it in a lower amount of container.
Yep.
So it's like we could do kind of the same instead of with an SUV, just with a family car.
Yep.
And the family car is way cheaper in this case. So, and then say to the architect, so, okay, we've seen this, we tested also in production. We now have an architecture repository. So often what you see with TOGAF and other architectures that you're using kind of building blocks that you can reuse in other architecture or new project, that kind of stuff. That is where we're gonna want to show up like, hey, you should kind of now do this. These are the requirements so that you know that you always end up in a container, and we already proven that that works. So that's and this is like how do you say, the three key things, like you have a code change that could
Yep.
lead to an infrastructure as code change. It's all very technical. Sorry for people who are less technical, listen to this. So code change, infrastructure as code change is like how it's running in the cloud. And then that can lead to new architecture insights. So yeah.
That's pretty interesting, Wilco. Now, Wilco, before we actually conclude our podcast session, let's take a lighter route in the form of a rapid fire round. All this while we were just going through the through different routes of sustainability, then about green technologies, and about green software champions, and all of that. Now let's take a lighter route where we are just going to talk about your likes and interests. All right.
Okay. Here we go.
All right. So the first question to you, Wilco. So Wilco, what's your favorite sports team?
Sport team. Ooh, the difficult one. I mean, it will be football for Americans who listen to this, soccer.
Okay.
And Ajax, because those, I mean,
Oh,
I
okay.
literally as a boy watched the one of the best teams at Ajax. Well, not with Cruyff, but and winning a lot of trophies. The last years, I had also an interest for the Premier League, like Manchester United.
Oh, wow. High five.
But that was also mainly because of their coach at the time, Erik ten Hag. He was from Ajax, and
Okay.
he's now gonna coach a team in Germany,
By
Bayer
Leverkusen.
Leverkusen. Yes, so I'm gonna follow that this year very on the foot. Yeah, is that like we say in
All
the
right.
Netherlands?
Perfect. Perfect. Now, if I would just like to ask you this, like, who would be your favorite Ajax player of all time? Who would you say it would be?
Jari Liedmanen was the first one who came directly into mind because he could score a goal and he was very well in playing as a team. So yeah.
Amazing. So that's amazing. Suppose Wilco, if I ever come over to the city where you're based in, like, what is that go-to place that you would like to take me across?
Oh, if so, where I live is very simple. So I live very near heathlands, although
Okay.
I have to kind of has a disclaimer. So in the Netherlands, because everything is below sea, a lot of thing is
Uh-huh.
how to say it, artificial created, kind of human created. But over the years, I think what is it, 50, 60 years, nature takes back what it's what it deserves or what it's gonna get. So we have a lot of heathlands. So I really within 6 minutes I'm in the forest slash heathlands, and I love to do walks for 2-3 hours because it really clears my head. So I would take you
Okay.
along on such a thing. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Looking forward for that. I mean, I've never been to Netherlands myself yet, but I definitely would like to plan a trip in the future. So let's see.
Cool.
All right. Now, in your language, since you come from Netherlands and you speak and the language that you speak the most is Dutch. So if
Yes.
I would just like to ask you, like, what is that famous Dutch phrase or let's say quote that you would like to, make our audience aware of? What would that be?
Oh, I would instantly say stroopwafel because it is like, oh, how do you explain this? What it is? It is a cookie. It's a very big cookie.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, it's very sweet and yeah, it's pretty unique.
Okay. And
Yeah.
how do you, convey that in the, the real talk, or let's say in the real world scenario?
How do you mean?
The real world scenario, like a quote kind of a thing.
Yeah, sorry, that's probably my lack of understanding.
No, no problem. I was saying that since Wilco, like
Yeah,
I mean, you come from Netherlands, and the language that you speak the most is Dutch. So I
yeah.
just wanted to understand, like, what is that famous Dutch phrase, or let's say quote, that that you would like to make our audience aware of, that you use in your real life scenario? Like in English, we say a lot of phrases. Like, for example, you know, what do I say? That climbing. I mean, I'm climbing a mountain to get the work done.
Oh, well, the funny thing. Okay, we have a saying in Dutch, and it is kind of how to say applicable to sustainability. So in sustainability, a lot of things, once you keep going, you start certain things, and we
Yeah.
say the monkey comes out of the sleeve. It is a weird saying, but it's like once that happens, it's like now it makes sense.
And how do you translate that into Dutch? How is that in Dutch? Like, I want to hear the original.
De aap komt uit de mouw.
All
Yes.
right.
Yeah, the aap komt uit de mouw. It's yeah. So it
Okay, this is
becomes
a very
instantly
nice thing.
it becomes instantly clear what all the fuss is about. Yeah.
The fuzz is about, exactly, or let's say the fizz is about with respect to the situation,
Yeah.
like that thing
Yes.
coming out.
Yes. 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 Yes.
All right, that's perfect. So the final question to you, Wilco, like, what is your favorite Indian dish that you would like to always try?
I would say I'm not that familiar, but I really like curry in general.
Okay.
So I don't if that counts.
Uh-huh. It definitely counts. Of course, it counts. So
So
curry, you mean
yeah.
anything, right? Any curry,
Yeah,
any
any curry.
Indian
I
curry.
kind of like all of them. Yes. Yes.
Nice.
Not too spicy, but yeah.
Okay. I understand that. Yeah, Indian food, Indian food also, it has its own, nomenclature. Let's say it has its own versatility. Few regions are pretty much, they have less spicy food, and few of them they have more spicy food. So everything is a little bit different there.
Yeah.
That
Awesome.
that's how it is. Yeah. And yeah. So Vilko, thank you so much for making time for for this podcast session from your busy schedule. It was such a pleasure having you through this initiative, and I really loved the journey that you took me across, especially talking about sustainability. The major thing that blew me off was the efforts that you're doing to calculate the CO2 emissions. And I mean your tenure as a strategic advisor in Green PT, and the way you're handling yourself. I mean, let's say the way you're doing, and doing well in your current tenure as the principal lead, that actually blew me off. So that's an
Thank
amazing
you.
thing,
I'm
Wilco.
betting I'm
So
betting compliments, but I'm taking this one. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
I mean, way to go for that. And really, really, I wish you all the best for your next future endeavors. And probably, let's see, in the future, we may again collaborate for a next
Yeah,
podcast
sure.
episode with much more interesting stories. But yes, so thank you so much, Wilco, again.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I always say I'm in this for the long run. So definitely, yeah, would be honored to be invited back again.
So I think, spoiler alert for the listeners, probably, so there's going to be a part two for this very soon.
Awesome.
Perfect. All right. So, listeners, on this note, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off. We would be back with another podcast episode with another eminent industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Take care. Stay tuned. Goodbye and au revoir. Thank you.